Hey, how's it going? Consider this kind of like a supplement to my last home water dispatch, talking about bonefish and tidal creeks and mangrove creeks where I am. I'm kind of doing this without a tripod, so I hope it doesn't make you nauseous. Anyway, I was kind of hanging out here at Kemps Creek on Cape Eleuthera in the Bahamas, and as I was waiting for bonefish to move back in with the incoming tide, I was reminded of some other cool fish. There's some little mottled mohara back in here. They're all facing into the creek system, the tide's slowly creeping in. I'm watching little bits of sargassum and thalassia, seagrass, moving in, so I know the tide's moving in. And they're all facing in, waiting to go into the tidal creek, where it's safe and where there's some food for them, hopefully. I was thinking about them as components of the ecosystem, but then also making this connection back to some cool bonefish science that came out of my lab with collaborators and an awesome PhD student. And thinking about the connection between different species here on the flats. And so some other really important research that happened here based out of Cape Eleuthera Institute was figuring out where juvenile bonefish settle and where they aggregate. And there's multiple species of bonefish that are represented in the ecosystem, but one that's dominant in the recreational fishery, so Albula vulpes. And it was through a lot of hard work and a lot of seining and going to different habitats and a lot of trial and error and a lot of zeros, no bonefish. And they finally discovered where these little bonefish reside. And that's an important connection, right? When we think about the maintenance of the populations and the role bonefish play in the ecosystem. Obviously, this is where their adults like to hang out. We know they like to go offshore to spawn, so they use these transitional habitats. They go to deep water. And the juveniles actually don't live in here. They live in shallow water embayments where there's, in terms of the substrate type, and there's not a tidal creek, there's no mangrove system. You wouldn't necessarily anticipate them being there. It was with a lot of hard work again that they were discovered in this location. And there's an association with the mohara. Through some additional science, some really cool video assessments, and then stable isotopes and diet, just a whole layer of studies that identified that there's this co-occurrence between the moharas and the juvenile bonefish. They don't compete for the same food. There's this social connection where you can think about, and actually it's kind of hard to see. I apologize again. The clouds are moving in, and we're hopefully, maybe going to get some rain, which would screw up my fishing, but it's good for the landscape and the vegetation and everything else. But when you look from the top to look at the mohara that are in the ecosystem, that are here in mottled mohara, they look kind of bonefish-like. They have the same, when they're little, they have the same little bars across their back. But the eyes are very different, the shapes are very different, and of the bodies, and the mouth shape's also very different. I'm not going to get into a lot of the mechanisms behind the association, but I was reflecting on this a lot. Sorry, I'm sitting down because my legs are cramping. I'm a little closer to the ground, a little closer to the substrate and to the flats. Maybe that's not a bad thing. I was reflecting on really the flats ecosystem and the community of species that are associated with one another. Yes, the mohara in here aren't, there isn't that co-occurrence with juvenile bonefish, but these mohara exist in other places. And it made me reflect more on, the connections between these different parts of the coastal ecosystem here in the Bahamas and their relative importance for bonefish. And we've demonstrated that for other species in terms of movements of things like lemon sharks, for, probably stingrays, and we've also done some work on barracuda. But going back to that broader idea of the species associations, the reliance, it might not be competition. It might be some sort of symbiotic relationship that occurs between the different species that drives their association, and we ultimately use them now as clues to figure out where juvenile bonefish happen to reside and settle out. And then as they get larger, they recruit to these tidal creeks. And so thinking about connectivity, thinking about the association of different species, and as anglers, we focus on the things that we chase. And that's a good thing, obviously, from, driving the economy in a place like the Bahamas, where fishing is a part of ecotourism and it helps support the local economy. At the same time, though, I think as anglers, we need to be stronger advocates and activists for the complete ecosystem and the other critters that are here, because mojaras actually support in one way the future of the bonefish populations. So keep that in mind as we're becoming more informed advocates and activists for our home waters or the places that you visit, where you can support the conservation and the connections with other people's home waters, right? We're sometimes just visitors in these places, but we can help to bring capacity and bring awareness. And I think all that's really important. And that ties back into a lot of things that, in terms of my evolution as a scientist, thinking more holistically about the things that I do, the connections between different components, and even the connections to people. Anyway, the tide's coming in, my butt's getting really wet, and the mojar are moving on. And I'm seeing some tails over here, so it's time for me to get up. And I hope you enjoyed this episode of Home Water Dispatch. I guess it's like a part 2 from Kemps Creek. And yeah, we'll see you again soon. Check it out for more stuff coming up on my Fish Forward YouTube channel. All right, cheers.